The Galactic Council had made their decision. The human colony ship Endurance was no longer worth saving. When the vessel sent out its distress signal from the dead zone of Sector 47, the alien representatives simply looked at each other and shook their heads. No species had ever survived in that region of space. The radiation storms were too powerful. The temperature fluctuations were too extreme. The gravitational anomalies crushed ships like paper. Why waste resources on a species that had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years? Ambassador of the Empire spoke the words that sealed humanity's fate. He called humans a young species that had not yet learned to respect the dangers of space. He said their loss would teach them an important lesson. The other ambassadors agreed. They voted unanimously to ignore the distress call. They believed the Endurance and its 12,000 passengers would be dead within 3 standard days. But they did not understand humans. They had never seen what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. Captain Martinez stood on the bridge of the Endurance and watched the communication screen go dark. The council had their request for help. They were alone. Behind her, the bridge crew sat in silence. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry, but did not have time for tears or anger. She had 12,000 lives depending on her decisions. The ship was in terrible condition. The main engine had been damaged by a radiation storm 2 days ago. Life support was running at 60% capacity. They had food for maybe 2 weeks if they rationed carefully. The hull had 17 breaches that the repair teams were struggling to patch. And worst of all, they were drifting deeper into the dead zone with every passing hour. Took a deep breath and turned to face her crew. She told them that the galaxy had given up on them. She said the aliens believed humans were too weak to survive. Then her voice grew stronger. She reminded them that humans had survived ice ages on Earth. They had survived world wars and plagues. They had clawed their way up from caves to reach the stars. And she declared that they would survive this too. The bridge erupted in determined shouts. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. It was the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. Dr. James worked in the medical bay without rest. The radiation was making people sick. He had limited supplies and too many patients, but he remembered his grandmother's stories about doctors in Africa who had performed surgeries with nothing but basic tools and determination. He started improvising. He used the ship's botanical lab to create natural remedies. He trained volunteers to help with basic care. When a child asked him if they would die, he smiled and promised her they would dance at her birthday party next month. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer faced an impossible problem. The main engine was beyond repair with their current resources, but had grown up reading about human inventors who had changed the world with nothing but creativity and hard work. She gathered her team and asked them a simple question. She wanted to know what they could build with what they had. For 3 days they worked without sleep. They took apart non-essential systems. They recycled every piece of metal and wire they could find. They combined technology in ways that would have shocked any alien engineer. And when they were done, they had created something new. It was not elegant. It was not beautiful. But it worked. The new engine was a hybrid system that no species had ever built before because no species had ever been desperate enough to try. The alien observers would later study this engine for years. They could not understand how humans had invented something so revolutionary while fighting for their lives. They did not realize that humans had always done their best work under pressure. Meanwhile, the passengers of the Endurance showed their own kind of strength. A former farmer named Robert organized food production in the cargo bays. He used artificial lights and recycled water to grow vegetables in spaces that were never designed for farming. A retired teacher named Maria Santos started classes for the children so they would not be afraid. A musician named David Park played his guitar in the corridors every evening to lift people's spirits. Everyone contributed something. The ship became a living example of human cooperation. There was no panic. There was no chaos. There was only the quiet determination to survive. On the fifth day, Captain Martinez faced her greatest challenge. The ship's sensors detected a massive gravitational anomaly directly in their path. There was no way to go around it. The alien databases said this anomaly had destroyed every vessel that had ever encountered it. The smart choice was to accept death. But Martinez was not interested in the smart choice. She gathered her senior officers and asked them to help her do the impossible. They spent 6 hours calculating and planning. They argued and debated. And finally, they came up with a plan so crazy that it might actually work. The plan was to use the gravitational pull of the anomaly itself to slingshot the ship out of the dead zone. It required perfect timing. It required the new engine to perform beyond its limits. It required everyone on the ship to work together in perfect harmony. One mistake would mean instant death. Announced the plan to the entire ship. She told them the truth about the danger. She gave everyone the choice to try something safer, even though safer meant certain death within a week. She asked them to vote. The vote was unanimous. Every single person on the Endurance chose to try the impossible. The next 12 hours were the most intense in the ship's history. Engineers monitored every system constantly. Pilots trained on simulators until their hands ached. Medical teams prepared for injuries. Parents held their children and told them stories about Earth. When the moment came, Captain Martinez gave a simple order. She told her crew to show the galaxy what humans were made of. The Endurance dove toward the gravitational anomaly. The ship shook violently. Metal groaned and screamed. People were thrown against walls despite the safety straps. The temperature inside the ship swung wildly between freezing and burning. Radiation alarms blared. But the humans held on. The engineers kept the engine running through sheer willpower. The pilots made adjustments with superhuman precision. The passengers stayed calm and helped each other. And then something miraculous happened. The ship emerged on the other side of the anomaly. They were battered. They were bruised. Several sections of the hull were barely holding together, but they were alive, and they were finally out of the dead zone. The first ship to find them was a patrol vessel. The aliens could not believe what their sensors told them. The human ship that had been left to die was not only alive, but had traversed a region of space that was supposed to be completely impossible to cross. Ambassador received the news during a council meeting. His face went pale. He had voted to let these humans die. He had called them weak and foolish. Now they had done something that no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. The Endurance limped into the nearest space station to a reception no one had expected. Thousands of aliens had gathered to see the ship that survived the dead zone. News of the human achievement had spread across the galaxy in hours. Scientists wanted to study their improvised engine. Military commanders wanted to understand their tactics. Everyone wanted to know how they had done it. Captain Martinez answered all their questions with simple honesty. She told them that humans did not give up. She explained that when the universe told them something was impossible, they simply tried harder. She said that her people had been fighting against impossible odds since they first climbed down from the trees. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Some ambassadors wanted to apologize to the humans. Others were frightened by what this event meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. If humans could survive the dead zone, what else could they do? But Ambassador surprised everyone. He stood before the council and admitted his mistake. He said he had underestimated humanity. He had seen them as children playing in a galaxy of adults. But now he understood the truth. Humans were not children. They were survivors, and the galaxy needed to treat them with the respect they had earned. The council voted to offer humanity a permanent seat among the senior species of the galaxy. It was an honor that usually took thousands of years to earn. The humans had earned it in 5 days. Years later, historians would look back at the survival of the Endurance as the moment when everything changed for humanity and the galactic community. It was the moment when the other species finally understood what made humans special. It was not superior technology. It was not greater numbers. It was something much simpler and much more powerful. It was the refusal to accept defeat. The 12,000 survivors of the Endurance became heroes across human space. Captain Martinez was offered command of the most advanced ship in the fleet, but chose to remain with her beloved Endurance until she retired. Doctor wrote medical textbooks that were translated into 100 alien languages. Chief engineer, hybrid engine design became standard on exploration vessels. And every year on the anniversary of their escape, the survivors gathered together to remember what they had accomplished. They would tell their children and the story. They would raise their glasses to toast the human spirit, and they would remind each other of the simple truth that had saved their lives. When the universe tries to kill you, you fight back. When everyone says something is impossible, you prove them wrong. When you are left to die in space, you survive anyway. That is what it means to be human. The galaxy had learned this lesson the hard way, and they would never forget it. The Endurance still flies today. Her hull bears the scars of that impossible journey. Her crew treats her like a living legend. And somewhere in her cargo bay, there is a small plaque with words that every human child in the galaxy learns by heart. The plaque reads simply, "They left us to die. We chose to live. That is the human way." And so it has always been, and so it will always be.